welcome to After the Paycheck, the series dedicated to helping people to and through their retirement process. I am here today with Sam Lang, founder and CEO of Rubino and Lang Wealth Partners, and as you can tell, we're doing things very remote today.
We're
Social
following the
distancing.
rules, Adam.
Following the rules, yes. Which actually brings me to kind of what the topic of this episode is we wanted to make sure we made something a little bit more timely for what's with everything that's going on in the world right now. So, Sam, thank you for joining me, first of all. I know that's been a little bit crazy for the past few weeks for everyone.
I'm actually looking forward to this. Been going a little stir crazy at the house, so looking forward to doing this video with you.
It's good to see a familiar face, you know?
Yeah.
So the kind of the genesis for the topic of this week's episode is about people who are currently withdrawing from their retirement accounts now that we're in a bear market, and some things that we should be aware of as we're heading into that. And this is something that you talk to a lot of people about over the years, about something that they should be watching out for.
Sure.
And what
I think I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. I think we talk a whole lot about people's retirement journeys. So listen. When you say we're in a bear market, I don't think there's anybody that's watching this video that's not aware of that situation right now, what's going on. Very volatile times, challenging times, uncharted waters, to say the least. So we just have to be mindful and careful of sort of how we do things, right? But if you're 20, 25 years away from retirement, hey, listen, we live in the United States of America. Things will come back to normal. Things will get better. So you get that time, right? It'll come back. Mm-hmm. But there's a term that I think people sometimes are familiar with, but maybe not quite understand exactly what it is. And I want to help break that down a little bit. It's called sequence risk, or sometimes people refer to as sequence of returns risk. And that's where really can sort of do a double whammy, especially if you are in need of that pool of savings and you're withdrawing from that money. So just envision if you're in your retirement journey and you planned on retiring at the end of this year, and your 401k was, $1 million before this started, and now it's $810,000, but you were planning on taking, say, $40,000 out a year. Well, you don't have $1 million to take 40 from. Now you got 800 to take 40 from. So it's a strain on that pool of money, and sequence risk is just part of it. It's just bad timing. We have a couple of years of what's going on right now, and you're no longer deferring that money. You're no longer adding to your pool of savings, but in fact, it's the complete opposite, and you're withdrawing from it. That risk can be that you really put that principal in jeopardy to go down too fast.
Okay. So from what I hear from other people, I guess it depends on where you are in your stage of life. Because people are telling me that, like, hey, just leave your money in your 401k because it's going to bounce back. There's some people that have had great years for the first couple of years and then some down years as they head into retirement, and then vice versa. Some people that are, just coming into the workforce now in a bear market and are going to do well as they come out into the 401k. What's different between someone my age right now in my strategy for contributing to my 401k or thinking about my retirement planning versus somebody who actually is about to retire or heading out? Like you said, there's that initial drop, but can you leave it in there and hope that's just going to kind of work its way back?
Sure. Fair question. We've done a bunch of simulations, hundreds of tests, and during your accumulation phase, and we've actually even gone back to year 2000 when the first time, at least in my adult lifetime, that we've experienced a severe drop, right? 2000, 2001, 2002, and then of course again in 2008. And we've done simulations, we've done studies, and during your accumulation phase, if we took that same return and just moved them, just swapped them around a little bit, at the end of the day, it almost doesn't matter because you're not touching that money. And if you start with, X and you end with Y, regardless if you leave it alone, sort of where those sequence of the actual returns fall into place, you'll be ahead. You'll have more than you started with, just like you, Adam. When somebody says, hey, you know what, leave it alone, you'll be fine. Well, you're in your 30s.
Right.
You got another 25, 30 years to go, and it will be fine. You will be fine. The major difference is when you don't have that time to leave it alone, and in fact, the example I just talked about, if you're nearing retirement, you are depending on that money to use for additional income, or worse yet, you're in retirement, you're actually withdrawing the money, that's when it can really become a slippery slope.
How so?
Well, if you let's use that as an example. Let's pretend same person, you have $1 million. It's year 2000. You retired. You're not contributing to your 401k anymore. You say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take out 50 grand a year. I got $1 million. Should be no problem. Well, if the market goes down, let's say 15%, you don't have $1 million anymore, right? You have
Right.
850. You take out $50,000. What do you have at the end of that 1 year? You have 800. So taking 50,000 from $1 million, I don't want to get too sort of technical right now, but that's a 5% withdrawal rate. If you take out 50,000 from 800,000, that's closer to a 6% withdrawal rate, right?
Okay.
So you're now, let's say in year 2001, you take out another 50, so that's now your principal balance is 750. But let's say the market goes down another 10 or 15%. So now you're at, I don't know, 600. So you get my drift there. That principal is eroding very quickly, a lot faster than you can probably afford for it to erode, because maybe you're only in your 60s, you have good genes, you eat right, you go to the gym and exercise, and you might live to 90. So you need that pool of money to last for a long time. We've seen situations when people have called us and say, hey, look, I retired 8 years ago, I had $1 million, in my mid-70s, and I only have, $350 left, but I still need to take $50,000 out a year. What can you do? You are the victim of sequence of returns and you didn't sort of properly plan for that. So I think, and we're in some challenging times right now, and that's why we're having this video for some of our folks that's visiting with us. Just you need to understand, if you are in retirement or very close to retirement, this is the time to make sure that you understand what lies ahead and how a negative return in 1 year or even 2 years, even 3 years can have a very negative effect on your principal balance, especially when you withdraw money.
So like you just said, let's say I am that person that's about to retire, or I'm currently in retirement. What are my options if I currently have $1 million or whatever, now 800,000 now in my portfolio, and I think I'm still going to bleed out money? What can I do to mitigate that risk or that loss?
Great question. I think if you look back in the last 10 years, we've had almost an 11-year bull market run, and it's been pretty easy. So if you were that person that took a lot of your money, put it at risk, enjoyed a great return, and you say, hey, you know what, this is fantastic, your life's going to be fantastic, you're really feeling the heat right now. So we've always, at our firm, when we actually meet with clients, we've been a big proponent and have always sort of promoted understanding the bucket approach, which is just understanding each where you put your money has a specific purpose. I like to look at, for most people, and everybody's different, right? Because there's no two people alike. But for most people, you should have 3 buckets. You should have a liquidity bucket. That's just money in the bank. I have a liquidity bucket probably for about 2 years worth of living expenses. It's probably a little bit more than most people, but I have 2 kids in college, so I need that liquidity. And right now, as we're talking, I think people understand why you need to have money liquid, because maybe you got laid off, maybe you got a pay cut, for a variety of reasons, you need cash at hand. So a liquidity bucket is pretty important. The second bucket is what we refer to as the foundation of your income. Whatever tools you use, whatever products, strategies you use, people use bonds, annuities, essentially build your own pension, which we know that no matter what happens, if the Dow's here or the Dow's here, that bucket of money is designed to give you the income that you need each and every month. And then the third bucket is your growth bucket, which is where nobody likes to take risks, but where you're willing to take on some risk. My third bucket is down a little bit right now, but I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not going to touch it. I don't need it for income. I know it's going to eventually come back. So when you said what are some things that people should be considering right now, if you are nearing retirement, there's no better time to make sure that you sort of at least understand and consider that bucket approach that we talked about and why it's important.
Okay.
Makes some
So
sense.
that absolutely, I think that goes to kind of like what you were just talking about with the firm about how you guys are really mapping out people's plans. You know, that three buckets, making sure that everyone's well balanced in everything that they're doing. But to go a little bit more deeper into each of those buckets, like the liquidity one's pretty straightforward. Hey, you know, you
Sure.
kind of want to have cash in the bank. That middle one where you said people need to have kind of that I don't want to say safety. What's the word I should be saying here?
Safety
Like
is
that.
good. There's nothing wrong with safety. Yeah,
Okay,
I
yeah,
like that
like
word.
that. Hey, here's money that is doing something that's not sitting in a bank in liquidity, but it's got some growth potential, right? But you're saying what are some options inside of that bucket that people
So I
can take
think I
advantage
think
of?
at the end of the day, in that bucket, whatever you decide to use, you're trying to build certainty. You're trying to build some guarantees. Certainty in an uncertain world is a pretty good thing. So if I know, for instance, I need $2,000 more a month, no matter what, I want to essentially create my own pension for as long as I'm alive for that $2,000. There's a variety of tools that people can use. Every firm is different. In our company, we like to at least consider using a fixed index annuity.
Okay,
Annuities are sort of just nothing more than a contract with an insurance company. Some are good, some aren't so hot. What we like to use is the ability to control your principal. Worst
okay,
case scenario, when you speak about safety, the worst case is you don't lose your principal is never in jeopardy, but the worst case is you could earn a zero rate of return. And if I was comparing that to my own Fidelity account, which might be down some 12%, I'd rather earn zero than be minus 12.
right.
But the flip side is that we get to earn some decent rates of returns.
Okay,
And not to talk specifics, but had an annual review with a client just 2 weeks ago. And a year ago from this taping, he earned double digits in his fixed index annuity with zero risk to principal. But in that case, some of these things, again, not to get too technical, but we can build in there where we can guarantee somebody an income stream regardless of how long they live. So that's some of the tools that you would think about using in that second bucket. And in the third bucket, just your traditional stuff, mutual funds, ETFs. Most people that's watching this probably know that we have a team approach here at the company. My two partners, John and Ryan, they do a fantastic job building that third bucket.
gotcha. So going to like kind of the pros and cons of each of these buckets. Pros of the liquidity bucket is it's cash on hand. You can cash it and do whatever you want. The downside would be
You're not making a whole lot.
you're not making my 0.05% of my in my bank
Well, you
account
could
isn't
probably do
enough.
a little better than that. I have a Capital One account. I think is paying like 1.4, but
That's
nothing to
what
get
my yeah.
excited about. But it's liquid. It's there. You can access it anytime you want. There's no penalties. Again, the downside is that it's not there for you to make money.
Gotcha. Okay. And then on the extreme side of no, shouldn't say extreme, but there's liquidity bucket. There's and then the safety bucket. What are some pros and cons there? You said the pros are you can't lose your principal, right?
Yeah, so anybody that's considering that, generally you might say something like, well, what can I do not to lose principal? Just don't lose the money. How do I protect the foundation of my savings? That's the pro. You cannot go backwards. The downside is that, again, depending on the product you use, there might be some trade-offs in liquidity. You might not be able to access all of your money at once.
Okay.
And listen, if things go like this, right? In 2019, what did the S&P do for return? Strong double digits, right? Close to like
Right.
30%. Well, listen, you're not going to earn 30% in these type of instruments, but you're not going to feel sort of left out because you're sitting on the sidelines like a bank account. You earn reasonable rates of interest with safety of your principal. The downside is that you might not make as much.
Okay.
And the downside is that there might be some trade-offs in terms of how much money you can access without a penalty.
Gotcha. Perfect. And then the third bucket, which is the growth bucket, is pretty equivalent to being in
Pretty
the money market,
self-explanatory.
right?
The upside is that you can make a lot. The downside is that your principal is at risk and you can lose money.
Gotcha. So when somebody is considering these three buckets, is there, I mean, I guess you could DIY it yourself, right? And just kind of say like, oh, hey, I'm going to put this there. And I don't want to give people like ballpark, like, oh, hey, because everyone's situation is unique. So I don't want to make that recommendation. I know that you guys never do either.
We don't. I mean, we have rules of thumbs that we sort of start with, but every person is different. So generally speaking, what we would do is we would work backwards. We might see somebody, they might say, hey, listen, I have a pension, I have Social Security, but I need $7,000 a month, and my income sources come to $6,000 a month. So I'm $1,000 short. And I know there's inflation. I know I need to probably take out a little bit more than 1,000 because I have to pay taxes. So how much should go into bucket 1, bucket 2, bucket 3? We just simply run an analysis for you. And we'll say, hey, look, if you put in of your, $800,000 in your 401k, if you put in $335,000 into bucket 2, that will generate the $1,000 net amount of money you need every month. So now we can take $600,000 or $500,000 or whatever the balance is, and if you consider putting that into bucket 3, even though it might go down in certain years like right now, but overall, it's in the long run, it's going to go up.
Okay.
And if it's going down, we don't have to worry about taking money from there. We don't have to worry about disturbing it and going and raid it and selling at a loss. We know that our day-to-day, our income gap, what we need to live our sort of dream retirement every single day is in bucket number 2. So that's our approach. We run a plan.
Okay, nice. So if I'm either nearing or in retirement right now in today, my options are kind of do nothing and risk whatever's going on right now. You're just basically in a ride, whatever's going on with your current retirement plans, I guess. Well,
you can always do nothing,
Yeah.
I mean, I think to Adam, to speak to your situation, probably doing nothing is the right thing. Maybe just rebalance a little bit, but leaving it alone, right? Because you're in your 30s, it'll come back. But think about the person that retired in 2000. If you did nothing and you just said, hey, you know what, I hope it's going to come back. Eventually it will come back. But guess what? If you need the same amount of money to live on, taking $50,000 from $1 million versus taking $50,000 from maybe $600,000 is an entirely different situation, right?
Right.
Taking 50 grand from a small pool of money puts a tremendous amount of strain on that money to get back to the higher number. That's where that sequence of returns risk really runs.
Really matters.
So I think to just bluntly answer your question, doing nothing for somebody that's nearing retirement or are in retirement, or what we refer to as the retirement red zone, like I'm really close, I'm within 5 years, that's probably not a great option. You
Right.
At least get a second opinion and understand where your risk and where your deficiencies are.
Gotcha. So yeah, I mean, you do, like I said, you have the option of doing nothing, but it's probably not the smartest thing in the world. Another option is kind of to try and DIY it yourself, I guess. But again, you're running into the same situations where if you don't know what's going on and how to properly balance things, you could mess up your situation even more, right?
We find when people DIY, do it yourself, listen, plenty of people are absolutely capable of doing it, but they just really look at it from a standpoint of how well is this asset performing? How's my rate of return? Can I do better than my cousin? Or I gave it to a pro and I actually did better on my own. They don't really look at it from a sort of a holistic standpoint, where it fits in, what happens if I leave it alone, I take income out. They essentially don't have a written retirement plan. I think that's the difference there.
Okay. And then the third option is to actually just talk to a professional and like you said, get that written retirement plan. So that way, it's testing itself against other things and other outside factors.
Yeah, we've been, I think, a great resource to a lot of people answering questions. We at the radio show, Just Don't Lose the Money. We've fielded some calls. What do I do now? And it's not that we would recommend every person, a solution, because sometimes people are just fine the way they are. Mm-hmm. But getting that second opinion, I think it's a valid thing to consider doing today.
Okay, awesome. Sam, thank you very much. Anything else that we should touch upon here? So before
I was just happy to get out of the house and or go into my office and do some stuff. But no, everybody should say do your part, stay safe, social distancing, and hopefully things will be back to normal pretty soon.
There we go, Sam. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks,
if you have any questions or you want to set up a time to chat with John, Sam, or Ryan about your financial situation, head over to afterthepaycheck.com and submit a form at the bottom of the page. Until next time, take care.